I really liked knowing that they understood what I was going through. It's not easy going to school every day and being different. So I liked having that support. I mean, don't get me wrong, we absolutely tormented each other, but it was nice to have the support.
Welcome to The Uptick, brought to you by the New Jersey Center for Tourette Syndrome and Associated Disorders, empowering children and adults through education, advocacy, and research by sharing the stories and experiences relevant to the TS community. Hello, and welcome to this episode of The Uptick. I am chatting with Anna and Eric Baldwin. Anna Baldwin is a middle school math teacher based in New Jersey, and Eric is about to go into his senior year in college at Franklin and Marshall College in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. It's great having you both on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. You both have Tourette and co-occurring conditions. You also grew up in a family where Tourette was talked about. You had there's another sibling that wasn't able to make it on the podcast, Sarah, the middle sibling in your family who also has TS. And I imagine that there's pros and cons to that. Definitely like having the support and understanding of siblings, but also the challenges and stress of being around other people ticking and how that can trigger your own tics and things like that. So this episode is devoted to discussing Tourette in the family. You've really grown up with the New Jersey Center for Tourette Syndrome. You've been involved in it as youth advocates and volunteers since you were kids. It makes sense to have you guys on the podcast as this is an NJCTS produced series. Can you each share a little bit about what it's like being in a family where your siblings also have Tourette?
Oh, it was
pretty loud.
Yeah. It was very loud. I would say when I was a freshman in high school was when my tics were the most severe. And the three of us would just feed off of each other all day long. As difficult as it was, we tried to make the most of it. Sometimes I would trigger Eric's tics and we would trigger each other's tics and try to have fun with it, make the most of the situation.
So I understand, Eric, you were diagnosed first. You were 5 years old, and then Anna and Sarah got diagnosed when they were around like sixth grade. Talk to me about that moment when, Eric, I don't know how many memories you have of being five, but so maybe this is a question for Anna, but like when Eric was diagnosed, Anna, do you have any idea that like, oh, maybe I have some of this too? Or like, how did that come about? How did your diagnosis come about?
Eric, I don't know how much you remember. You remember anything
Not
from
a whole lot.
I'd be impressed if you did.
So I remember from that time period, Eric got the diagnosis, and for so long we had known something was going on. We just couldn't figure out what it was, because this was probably like 2007. And so there wasn't a whole lot of information. My mom was so relieved when she got the diagnosis, but at the same time, what the doctor had said to her really terrified her. She told him to take him home and love him. And she really didn't give any hope or anything like that. So my mom, she was devastated. She thought that he was never going to be independent, and she thought it was just going to be this lifelong, horrible struggle. She was trying to come to terms with it, find out more about it. Luckily, one of our cousins had already been diagnosed with it. We have a very twitchy family. So she ended up calling her sister, my Aunt Regina, to just kind of talk to her and see what it was like, get some insight. And we kind of just took it one day at a time for a while. But at that point, we had no idea that myself or Sarah had Tourette's. I was actually brought into the allergist as like a 2 or 3 year old because I kept blinking, I kept sniffling, which typically are the initial signs of Tourette. And they wrote it off as allergies, saying we had dust mites.
Oh,
so it wasn't until... You remember that?
I was going to say our neighbor was a nurse. Do you remember what kind of nurse Mrs. Berry was?
She worked in the ER, I think.
I remember our mom was telling me a story of she was just with me one day around her, and our neighbor looked at me and said, I think he's having a seizure, because my eyes kept like rapidly closing and I was like looking back into my head, and I was maybe 2 at the time. They say it starts with the head and it moves down your tics.
Oh, mine started. That's funny. Yeah.
You always hear that like eye blinking is the first one.
Like a head bob or yeah. No, interesting with this story about them thinking it was a seizure. I had a similar experience where this was in elementary school. I hadn't been diagnosed yet. Actually, no, I had, but pretty recently. And there was a teacher who I'm not sure if they knew I had Tourette's or not, but they thought it was a seizure and actually sent me down to the nurse on my own, which is a little odd. Like, why would you send a student kid down the hallway to the nurse if you think they're seizuring? But anyway, so maybe they need a lesson on Tourette and also epilepsy at the school, but very supportive teacher otherwise. But that was one story I remember. Yeah, so Eric was diagnosed first, and then Anna, how did yours eventually come about? I'm sure eventually they realized it wasn't just dust mites, there had to be something more to it.
My tics were always super, super minor. I would blink my eyes, I would sniffle, and I used to just kind of twitch my arms. So it wasn't anything noticeable until I hit fifth grade, is really when it started. Because we already knew Eric had it, we knew the likelihood was I also had it. So we ended up scheduling an appointment with the pediatrician, who then recommended us to a neurologist. So it took about a year to actually get the diagnosis, just because it took forever to get the appointment. But we had suspected that's what it was because of Eric.
And then Sarah's case, was she diagnosed around that same time?
She was diagnosed a year or two after me.
I
Okay.
remember at that point, it was just kind of like, well, it might as well be all
Of course.
three. No
We
one
all
was
have it.
surprised.
And then our
So,
cousin was diagnosed.
and yeah, you'd already had the cousin with it, and
Well,
yeah.
this was another
This is
cousin.
the second cousin.
That's what that happened in my family too. Similar things where, yeah, as you go through, you're developing your childhood, you'll notice like cousins and stuff start showing signs of tics, and it like as the family grows and evolves, so does the Tourette. It seems like, or at least tics.
The family
Tell
parties
me
are
about
great.
what is it like growing up with other siblings that have that?
I really liked knowing that they understood what I was going through. It's not easy going to school every day and being different. So I liked having that support. I mean, don't get me wrong, we absolutely tormented each other,
Oh,
but it was nice to have the support. What do you
At
think,
the end
Eric?
of the day, yeah, they
I
understand it.
guess I can't really speak to. I don't know what it's like to grow up without siblings with Tourette. I've just always had that kind of reassurance that I'm not the only one going through this. Everyone else has the same exact thing that I do. No matter how weird you feel in school, going down the hallways, people looking at you, you go home and you're just Eric.
And then the weird is amplified by the siblings.
Yeah.
But that's like the other weird.
True.
Did any of you ever have the same tics?
Just the common ones, I think.
Okay.
It was funny because they say, everyone with Tourette's is totally different. And that was 100% true for us. My sister, now this is back when we were in high school, she mostly dealt with the comorbidities that came with the Tourette's. So the anxiety, the OCD, that seemed to affect her more. My vocal tics seemed to be the biggest problem for me. And then it was Eric's motor tics that seemed to be the biggest problem for him. So all of us, while we all had the same thing, the struggles were very different.
I've had like 3 vocal tics ever.
Yeah, and I had a screaming tic and coprolalia.
That was bad.
Yeah.
I can only imagine. Yeah, I was always more the motor tic type. I got some mild vocal tics, throat clearing noises, squeaking, humming, tongue tapping, like the minor stuff. But my complex tics were my motor tics. It's funny too. I also come from a family where my siblings also have diagnoses of Tourette. I have 3 siblings. 2 of them are diagnosed, but their tics are even more mild than mine, and they're a lot more the co-occurring conditions. I think they have like barely enough tics to get a diagnosis of Tourette, and then probably the one vocal tic and then like 2 motor tics or something. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but really it's that perfect Punnett square where like I was always the one with more of the tics, and then OCD, anxiety, depression, the other kind of co-occurring conditions we saw more with my siblings. When your tics were flaring, at the end of the day, say you're both home from school and you're exhausted, tired from the end of the school day, you're also in a safe place being at home, so the tics are coming out more. How did you guys cope with that? With, let's say, Eric's motor tics are going, Anna, you got your vocal tics. Would you guys just kind of isolate, or over time did you get to the point where you could just kind of coexist in the same room and it just didn't really affect each other?
I don't think we were ever at a point where we would isolate ourselves except for like very extreme circumstances. Like if
Yeah,
we had a tick that was like actually hurting us, something along those lines. But
yeah, that
I,
was the
but
only time because
between
I
the
had a
three of
really
us,
bad shoulder punching tick.
Mm.
And that one, that one I would kind of leave because I know it's upsetting to watch. So
The
that one I
self-injuring ticks are
would,
just the worst. Those are awful.
yeah, so I would go for runs but most of the time we just let it be.
between the three of us, we never, I guess Sarah more than us, but we're not super like, we don't pick up on ticks super easily. I think this is true for you, Anna. Sarah will go to the leadership academy and come back with like 20 new ticks. She
Mhm.
traded them all out. We never really picked up on each other's, I don't think ever.
I didn't pick up other people's ticks, but if I saw someone else ticking, mine would increase.
That's how mine was too. I was never that prone to tick contagion. It would just, I think my very first time I went to a conference, people with Tourette, and I picked up a tick or like one or two ticks. After that, for the most part, no, I wouldn't, but it definitely would exacerbate my own ticks just being around them. I think we're all different with that regard. What do you guys attribute some of your success to in terms of just, I mean, you've gone through life, both have gone through college. Eric, you got one more year, but we'll count it, we'll round up. And I remember you telling me you are looking at grad school options, and both of you have jobs and work and things that are keeping you busy. I'm asking this question from a place of kind of what advice would you give to a young person, maybe someone recently diagnosed or someone in those teenage years who has Tourette's and these co-occurring conditions. What do you attribute your successes to when it comes to Tourette and how you managed it?
I'd say that don't even consider it. And things like school, work, like what you want to do, what fields you want to go into. I've always had like an idea of what I wanted to do, and I always knew that it was going to be hard and it was going to suck. But it was always, that's what I want to do. This is my thing. This is my calling. I'm just going to go for it because there are a million reasons that I could fail. And Tourette is probably not the highest on the list. You just gotta go for it.
Kind of like, what choice do we have? Like, Tourette's is all that I know. Like, I've had it my whole life. I wouldn't want someone to pity me for it. It's just kind of, we find ways to live our life and pursue goals given the cards we're dealt.
Exactly.
Anna, what are your thoughts on that?
Mine's kind of a little bit different. So I would say get involved. Meet other people who have Tourette's. Yeah, it was nice having siblings with it who could relate to me. But when I first met somebody outside of my immediate family who also had Tourette's and could share in those experiences, that was a life changing moment for me. It was some convention that I went to, but just meeting those people really opened my eyes to all the different possibilities that were out there. And from that point forward, I got involved with NJCTS. I learned how to advocate for myself. I learned more about Tourette's and coping mechanisms. And that really is what led me to succeed.
Did either or both of you speak about it to your class ever when you were in grade school?
Actually, the day that I was diagnosed, I spoke to my sixth grade class about it.
I mean, you
So,
were ready to go by that point. Like, you
yeah, at that
knew it
point,
from your
I knew
family
exactly
and
what
an
it
expert
was.
in it.
Yeah, and we knew that I had it. We just needed to get that official diagnosis from the neurologist. But we knew because Eric had already been diagnosed, we knew what it was.
Mhm.
And at that point, I was pretty severe. So everyone in my class, they just kind of looked at me like, what are you doing? Because I was making noises, I was punching my shoulders. It was severe and I couldn't suppress it at all. So my mindset was if they don't know what's going on, they're going to make comments, they're going to say things. But that's just ignorance. So I wrote a little speech. It was a one-page thing. I typed it up and then I went into school that day and I read through the speech thinking once they know what it is and they have that information, if they then come back and make fun of me, that says more about their character than it does mine.
Mhm.
So I did the presentation and then I went and got the diagnosis. And then from that point on, I found the youth advocate program with NJCTS. And so then I was actually trained on how to do it. And I did the presentation in Eric's classes. I did it for Sarah's classes, and it kind of spiraled. I've probably spoken to, I don't even want to guess how many people, but I would go into different schools, and now I do it for my own students every year.
Wow. Do you do that like the beginning of the school year to let them know, or how do you organize that?
At some point in the beginning of the year, I just give them a heads up. Hey, I have Tourette's. This is kind of what it is. But then on Tourette Syndrome Awareness Day in New Jersey, that's when I try to do the presentation for the class.
In June.
Yeah, I do it they already know what it is. It's not like, because they all have the internet, they see it on TikTok. It's not like our generation growing up where it was, you only heard about it from TV and it was just cursing. Kids have a little bit more of an understanding than we did.
But this is an interesting point. I'm curious to hear how you explain Tourette to your students, because like you said, they're growing up in a different generation. They do have TikTok. They see the examples of it. They probably still see a lot of the extreme, like the sensationalized stuff, but there's a chance they may also see other characterizations of it. When you're disclosing Tourette or doing kind of the Tourette spiel to your students now, how is it different from a presentation you may have given when you were a youth advocate?
At the end of the year, I still actually use the NJCTS presentation, and I just kind of go through that with them. But at the beginning of the year, I usually wait till I'm having like a bad tic day or something, because I want the kids to get to know who I am as a teacher first. And then once they get to know me, it's usually about a month or so into school. If I'm having a bad tic day, I'll let them know. Just as they're coming in, they all sit down. I'll tell them, hey guys, I'm having a bad tic day. And then I explain I have Tourette syndrome, and I tell them sometimes you're going to see me blinking, you're going to see my muscles moving, you might hear me sniffling. Those are just my tics. I can't help it. It's just something you might notice. And then it's cute the rest of the year. Every time they see me ticking, they'll point it out. Look at Miss Baldwin. Is that Tourette's?
Is that
like it's a big secret?
Yeah. Yeah. Do they like try to show you the videos they see of like TikTokers with it and stuff, like, oh, this person has it. Are you familiar? Like they assume, I find when I disclose mine to young people and actually to adults too, or people my age at least, they're like, oh, do you know so-and-so? I don't know who the latest TikToker is with it, but like with this assumption that we all know each other, which is kind of endearing because like we sort of do, or at least we have some like knowledge of it, a lot of us, but it's just, I don't know, it just makes me smile when I hear that.
Yeah, that's always their follow-up question. They're like, oh, do you know this TikToker, this YouTuber? And
yeah.
I, of course, tell them that is my best friend.
We are actually getting coffee tonight after
dinner.
I'm going to be seeing him tonight. We've got dinner plans. Yeah.
I do think that is a big part of the reason why it is more well known now. People like Billie Eilish, these really famous musicians who are coming out and saying, oh yeah, I have Tourette. Kids are seeing it. They're seeing that it's not just cursing, it's blinking and these movements, and but that's not like the focal point of this person.
That's true.
It's led to a lot of awareness, not just around tics, but just like the co-occurring conditions as well. I mean, mental health awareness has so much more. I mean, the younger generations now so much more accepting of an understanding of therapy, talk therapy, seeing your psychologist, all of that, like using the resources we have to treat what's going on or to manage what's going on. I hear so much more about like OCD, anxiety, depression, everything else too, as well. I think there's just a lot more awareness in general than when I was really young and first diagnosed.
It is interesting to see because I've now been doing some variation of the presentation for 13 years. And the reactions that I got 13 years ago versus the reactions I get now are totally different. And the questions that I get are totally different. When I first started, they all had kind of heard of it. And the questions were way out of left field. But they truly just didn't know. Mm-hmm. And it's so interesting now where I think I'm telling them a really cool fact about it. And they're like, we know.
Like rolling their eyes, like, this is boring. Like...
Yeah, they're like, come on. Like, that's obvious. But it blows my mind how much these kids are actually aware of now. And the questions that they come up with are really thoughtful, much different than what I was used to at first.
It's a testament to the advocacy work we've done over the years and others are doing, that now we're at that point where discussion can get advanced to the next place. Eric, you're in a little bit different of an environment being on a college campus. Do you want to talk to me a little bit about how that experience is, like with roommates, classmates, professors, all of that, and having Tourette?
All throughout grade school and high school, like I would do these presentations, my class. I would make sure everyone knew this is the thing I have, this is why I'm doing this. When I got to college, I just kind of didn't.
It's a lot harder to do that in
It
college.
is.
There's
No,
a
when no
lot
one
more
talks about
people,
this, it's so much harder to disclose as I found too. Yeah, I can second that.
but also I just think it's kind of funny. People being confused because I don't care anymore. But it's also gotten to the point where most people see me ticking and they know what it is. And even if they don't know, oh, that's Tourette syndrome, they know, oh, this dude has a thing,
Mhm.
right? He's not just choosing to do that.
Yeah, you get into those self-selecting circles. Also, I think as people get older, hopefully they get less judgmental. Not always, but like I know you're doing a lot of research in undergrad, Eric. Have you disclosed to the faculty members working with you on it, or to your colleagues in the research?
I definitely rely heavily on like my accommodations for school. So
Mhm.
all of my professors know exactly what's up. They're the ones that I'm doing research with over the summer. One of the nice things about a small school, my largest class has had maybe like 17 kids in it. I
Uh,
You have a very personal relationship with all of your professors. They are going to be understanding.
it's different at every university, but at mine, they give you the resource office, accessibility office gives you that letter, and you can take it to your teachers, to your professors, and it basically says like, this person is on file with us. They get these accommodations, and every university does it a little differently. That's how my school did it. And you would take it to your teachers on the first week or so and just like hand it out. I'd stay after class. And I actually liked that because it kind of took some of the pressure off me from having to disclose myself and like go into my talk about, because like, yeah, I'm in college, it's a new class, and I'm got anxiety, I got all the just whatever. I don't always want to disclose. You give them that letter and then they hopefully take it home and read it. Often those letters, I mean, sometimes they'll have the diagnosis name in it, sometimes they don't. But at least then, if I do go to office hours or something and I want to talk to that professor, I already kind of broke the ice a little bit. So I always loved working with the accessibility office because I don't know, I feel like they just kind of know how to make this stuff a little easier in college.
Absolutely. That I made the mistake of, so I had a 504. I got it in sixth grade and it followed me all through high school. I was doing really well. So I was like, all right, I don't need it. I'm not going to get it transferred over. And my first semester of college, I did great. And then everything caught up to me. And then I was a hot mess. Then I had to backtrack and get all the paperwork and documentation and go to the Office of Disabilities. And I wish I would have just done that from the start because I may have not needed it that first semester of college, but I definitely did the second semester.
Doubt I would have made it through even my first year of college without accommodations. And especially as I've gotten further into college, it's gotten more stressful and that exacerbates things. My tics very often get to the point where I can't do the work in time. Like, even just physically, if I were like lightning fast mentally, I physically just couldn't type or like write things because my hands are going and my head's shaking around and I can't like read the paper.
Accommodations are super important. And I think also for me, some of it was kind of learning how college was different than high school. I definitely went into my first semester of college thinking, oh, this is just going to be kind of like high school, maybe a little harder, whatever. And I did not do well on my first slate of exams at the end of the first semester. And I was like, all right, I guess I can't just like study the night before and kind of roll in like I would in some of my high school classes and was fine with that. College, definitely you have to think a little more deeply, like understand the material a little more. It's less about, at least with my major, it was less about rote memorization and more about like, do you actually understand the concepts? Overall, I think I felt that I preferred the way that academics worked in college. I liked that I could choose more of my classes. I could find classes where I was writing more rather than test taking, or classes that were in topics I was really excited about. I also like that there's not, usually it's not as much busy work in college. You're not doing like little homework assignments every day. It might be like bigger projects or exams or papers or things like that. Once I adapted to college, I think I preferred the workload of college over high school. I just thought it kind of catered to my neuroatypical brain a little better than high school did. Everyone's different on that. But for me, it was not just about getting accommodations, it's also just adapting to the difference that is college.
Oh, I absolutely agree. The college, I had to actually learn how to study. You're in class every day, you absorb it. And I never studied until I got to college. And then that was tough, trying to learn how to study for the first time in college. So that
It's like,
did,
oh,
it
I
took,
have to try now.
yeah. But it was an adjustment. But I ended up actually really enjoying college because it did challenge me.
Yeah, definitely. I felt like at the end of a semester that I earned the grade I got. And like if I worked hard on something and I don't know, I felt like I really understood the material more rather than just kind of memorizing it or getting it done. Like you really felt like you engaged with it more, which was good. Eric, what's your research on? Do you want to tell our listeners a little bit about what you're working on?
Right now, I am going through and processing data sets from the Arecibo radio telescope, rest in peace. Uh, I'm still very sad about it.
I cry every night, Eric, when I think about it.
Me too.
Brings a tear to my
It's
eye.
what a bummer just thinking about it. Yeah.
But I am going through radio telescope data, processing it, and essentially searching for highly accelerated binary pulsar systems. A pulsar is just a kind of star corpse that spins really fast and shoots lasers, essentially.
Wait, stars can shoot lasers?
Stars
Oh,
can
that's
shoot
my
lasers.
takeaway. Are
Pulsars
you?
are giant spinning space lasers.
Wow. Is the plan to become a some kind of astronomer or like theoretical physicist or like what's the dream for you?
My major right now is astrophysics. I would like to continue with that. I really love the kind of research I've been doing, which has been almost exclusively this. But if I could just continue processing this sorts of data and this kind of research, this is what I want to be.
Yeah, I seem very passionate. Anna, as a math teacher now, what led you down that path, and how did you know you wanted to be a teacher or work with students from a young age? I'm curious to hear kind of how that unfolded.
And it's funny, I was diagnosed in sixth grade and now I'm a sixth grade teacher. But the main reason was my sixth grade teacher, actually. So she was incredible. She fought with us to try to get accommodations for me. She made sure that I knew that she saw me, she knew I was capable, she knew I could do the work, and she really just made such a profound impact on my life that I wanted to go and do the same for my students. Because I've also had teachers that were the complete opposite. I know what it's like to be in a classroom and think the teacher doesn't like you or think the teacher doesn't see my potential. And I never want a kid in my classroom to feel that way. I want to make sure that if they have Tourette's or whatever it is they have, they feel supported and they know that they are capable. And so I'm actually working on my master's so I can go into special education.
Wow. Have you had a student with tics or Tourette?
Yes,
Wow, I bet they were thrilled to have someone like you who gets it as their teacher and mentor. That's gotta just, you
they were
know.
very excited. And it's
Wow.
funny, every year when I do the presentation, I'll have kids raise their hand and tell me all the different things they have. They're like, I have autism or I have whatever. And I'm like, welcome to the club.
Yeah, yeah. I
We
hope they keep feeling free to speak about it and engage with it and keep the conversation going for sure. And I know you've done a lot of thinking around the importance of accommodations, 504 plans, and like those early interventions for students. Do you want to share a little bit more about your thoughts on that topic?
I think that it is crucial. And for me, I went back and forth on this for a while because there were some days where I really did not need my accommodations. It was an easy day for me. My tics weren't bad. I was able to focus. And I would have stretches like that. And I would kind of second guess, like, oh, I don't really need these accommodations. I almost felt like I was faking. I struggled with that for a while, which is why I didn't immediately bring the accommodations over when I went to college. But all it takes is one bad tic day where you realize, oh, I actually do need this. And it was a struggle getting the accommodations, but it was something that I really did need, especially I would say my freshman year of high school was the worst year for me tic wise. And there were points in time where I just physically could not sit in a chair. And I needed those accommodations to be able to keep up with my classmates. So I had a couple different things. And I know different people have different accommodations, but I had extended time on assignments. I was able to, if I needed to stand up and go take a walk around the building, I was able to go do that. I had access to the nurse, and I think it was time and a half on assessments. But that was really what led me to be able to be successful in school.
No, it's true. Definitely not a crutch. Like we should all use the resources that we have at our disposal. That's why they're there. At best, they'll level the playing field, but realistically, it's still accommodation isn't perfect, and it can help you a little bit. And so use it. It's also embarrassing as a kid. I think that was always my biggest fear as a kid with accommodations was I also had extra time. And I don't know, there's got to be a better way that maybe teachers in schools do it differently now, but it was embarrassing to be like the last kid taking his exam. And then I like go up to the front and I'm like asking my teacher, hey, can I come in during recess or something or after school and finish it? And like, especially when everyone else in the class wants to like go and leave, they want to go to lunch or recess or whatever is next. I don't know, or they're all looking at you and you're the only one that isn't, that's like still working. There's definitely a social pressure on me to not use accommodations, especially the like extra time one. I think that was my biggest barrier, like growing up with Tourette and like reasons why sometimes I wouldn't use it was just because like it was kind of embarrassing. I think what we did, I would turn in my exam or whatever early and just put like a T at the top and circle it, and then T stood for time. I always thought it stood for Tourette's, and then I learned like years later that like no, on my IEP it was actually like stood for time. And then the teacher would connect with me after class and like discreetly we would arrange a time for me to finish it. And I like that. I think my advice to people listening to this that are embarrassed about using their accommodations is express that to your teachers, express that to your 504 worker, your teacher's sponsor, whoever you've got that's working with you on this, because you can troubleshoot with them and kind of figure out what makes the most sense. Like being a kid is tough, especially in like middle school and stuff when you just want to fit in and not be bullied and just kind of want to not draw attention to yourself. So accommodations can easily draw attention to you. So if it takes some back and forth and figuring out how do we make this work, like please have that conversation with your teachers. I'd rather see you have that and troubleshoot it and get the accommodation rather than not using it at all because it's embarrassing. Often there is some kind of solution there that we can do.
And honestly, speaking as a teacher, the teachers get it. We know everyone who has accommodations, and we want to make sure that the kids who have accommodations, A, they're obviously getting them, but B, they don't feel isolated. They don't feel any different. So we come up with different systems. I had 18 different hand signals this year for different kids to sign for different things. And we had post-it note systems. And I had kids all over the classroom every day, just doing different things. So nobody knew that this person was still working on a test or that person is getting extra help. Everyone is all over the classroom. And from day one, I say everybody gets what they need.
Wow, these are the things that when people think of teachers, they don't realize all that goes into being a teacher. Like you have to be aware to learn these 15 different hand signs that various students are using. Every student has the support that they need, and it's invisible to the rest of us. We don't notice that this is actually like going on under the scenes.
In one of my class periods, I had 8 kids that all had a different hand signal for something different. One kid was if he had to go to the bathroom. Somebody was they needed extra time. Somebody else was just checking in to make sure they're okay. And it was nuts by the end of the year, all these different signals I had going on. And the rest of the kids just had no clue.
Yeah. If we can seamlessly do that where like they just don't notice, because I think that's always my goal is like, yeah, I'm happy talking about my Tourette's and owning it and all that. But there are times when I just want to not draw attention to myself. And if we can build a world where that's it, where you just other people just don't even notice, it just kind of things just happen and seamlessly and no one's drawing attention to anybody, like, lovely, sign me up. Like, that's the world I want to live in.
We're definitely moving in that direction. We're definitely getting closer to that. I remember being in school and everyone was at the desk, everyone was doing the same thing at the same time, and nobody was doing anything different. And now in education, there's a big push against that. We're not supposed to be doing that, which is great, especially for neurodivergent kids. There's all these different tasks that we do. We do a lot of station work in my classroom. So that way, if somebody is taking extra time, no one else notices because they're busy moving to different stations around the classroom. Everyone's getting what they need.
Eric, any thoughts on the topic here?
I guess I'll just say I have immense respect for teachers who can actually be there for their students in that way, because I have had many teachers who have not lived up to that standard. I can tell it's not easy to be there for everyone and be on top of that, but
You're one teacher. If there are no aides or anyone else in the classroom, it's one teacher responsible for however many students they've got, 15, 20, whatever the number. And that's a lot, knowing what each student needs and then making sure that they all get that in the right way. That's tough.
It is, but my ADHD actually makes it easier.
Does it? How so?
It
Just
does.
because you can compartmentalize your mind in a bunch of ways at once. And
Yes, well, I'm so used to having 18 different things on my mind that 18 different hand signals don't even faze me.
there you go. There you go. Find a job that uses your diagnoses as strengths, and always be thinking creatively about how you can use what you've got as a strength. I love it. That leads us to kind of where I like to end these episodes. I always like to ask people what advice you have for people with Tourette. And I know that is the world's biggest, broadest question, and you can answer it in so many ways. It's broad by design so that you can speak to adults, you could speak to a kid that was just diagnosed. Heck, you could speak to the parent of a recently diagnosed kid with Tourette. But what comes to mind is the pivotal, important point you would say when it comes to tips or advice or mantras, anything like that?
There is no one size fits all. Every day, it's going to be something different. It's going to be something new. New challenges are going to come up constantly. You just have to learn to roll with the punches and try to make the most of it. Laugh at yourself when you can. Try to own it. I know that's easier said than done. And there are days where there's a lot to take in, but lean on your people, find your people, and own it.
I think kind of on a similar note, like Tourette will be a roadblock only if you let it. It's fully how you think about these things. Like what that doctor said to our mom about me. Like, yeah, just take him home and love him. He's not gonna go through school or like get a desk job or
Be an astrophysicist.
Right?
I haven't even gotten my bachelor's yet. All right. If you are thinking to yourself, yeah, I'm not going to be able to do this, then you're not.
Yeah, our self-limiting beliefs are self-limiting. They hold us back. Use the resources that you have at your disposal, whether that's through therapy, whether that's medicine, whether that's coping mechanisms you develop on your own, whether that's whatever your quote unquote cure is. We have these resources out there so that we can live in a neurotypical world a little bit more easily. Great points from both of you. Been awesome having you on the podcast here. To all of our listeners, I hope you found this to be an enlightening conversation. Join us in 2 Tuesdays from now with our next guest. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Uptick, brought to you by the New Jersey Center for Tourette Syndrome and Associated Disorders, empowering you to stretch the boundaries to live your best life. The NJ Center for Tourette Syndrome and Associated Disorders, NJCTS, its directors and employees assume no responsibility for the accuracy, completeness, objectivity, or usefulness of the information presented on this podcast. We do not endorse any recommendation or opinion made by any guest, nor do we advocate any treatment.